Morning, everybody. So today we're going to be taking a look at a consequence, the only diagram that we have that illustrates the trade-off between government objectives, and that is Phillips curve. So the Phillips curve, which we're going to study today, and we mentioned previously, shows us a relationship between inflation, or wage rate inflation, and unemployment. And it shows us an inherent trade-off between the ability to have the full level of employment and also have low and stable inflation. And it's an observation. And what that means is Phillips literally looked at outcomes over periods of years, and he found the outcome of the relationship between the two values. We're going to use the core econ text today, and that was given to me by Abby Galpin, who is using the core econ text at the University of Bath. Right, so that core econ text is an online text, and it's got this really great introduction that I think is worth reading here, and it talks about a German supreme minister called Helmut Schmidt. Now, after you read that, I want you to take a little while to read that. It is really good. After that, though, I'm going to get you to flip a little further into the book, and they talk about inflation and why it happens. So they say, and it's quite important, and this is a direct quote from the book, it talks about how when unemployment is low, HR departments need to set higher wages, right? So when unemployment is low, we set higher wages because it's more difficult to find the workers that we need. Right, but when wages are high, we spoke about this before, that makes a lot of cost for firms, and we can't hire as many people, and so we have to let some people go after the price level of goods has gone up. And so there's this like to and fro that I think if you begin to think about it and you follow along with what they're saying in the text here, it should make a great deal of sense. Now, in Phillips' original work, this is an excerpt actually from his 1958 paper. He observed this curve and drew it into his work. I've copied it directly here for you. There's a link to the real thing if you want to read it. It's actually a very readable work. So here he put the inverse relationship as, okay, for the people who understand the math term, the regression of all of these different data points. And the data points, like, let me see if I can just make a little illustration here. Oh, let's use this pen. The data points are all of the the data points are all these elements here. Okay, so now these correspond with a particular year, and each one of the particular years here is regressed, which means that we look at the distance. Well, actually, it's probably a vertical distance. We look at the distance between that point and this line, and we take the sum of the values and we reduce them in a way that, or we average them out, and we get this curve, this curve that gets approximated. And that's Phillips' curve. And so that's how he actually drew the thing. And so unemployment starts at 0 on this axis, and then it runs higher and higher along there. And here we have a 0% rate of change of money wage rates per year. Now, note how the curve here falls below 0%, right? So that's trying to say that wages are deflating during that period of time. All right, so this area here, we're getting deflating wages when wages are falling. But the core econ text takes a different stance on this. Now, it's the same idea. Those points are still these points, and they still are regressed. So we average out the difference between these points, and we find a curve, and that's what the curve looks like. So this is the curve now. But note that they've taken this scale and they've inverted this scale. Now, I looked for a reason for why they did this, and I think the only reason is that they're trying to suggest to you that the shape of this curve seems to follow another shaped curve. Remember the long run aggregate supply and the LRAS here, that one? And we decided that there was also the SRAS, and the SRAS, I think they're trying to draw a relationship between the Phillips curve and the SRAS, and I haven't sorted out in my mind whether that's legitimate to do or not, but certainly the core econ text has done this, and it's valid because they made the axis start at 12 and get smaller. So if you're wondering why that's happened, I can't come up with an answer just yet. If you can come up with an answer for me, that would be cool. But back to the original Phillips curve. Now, Phillips curve is a contentious issue, and it's debatable because it's made of observations from small periods of time, like this one here, right? So this is only data from 1861 to 1913, so British employment and inflation data over that period of time. British? Yeah. And so you can see here, these are the years. So this is 1886 and 1879. And 86, 85, 84, 83, 82, 81, 80, 79. You can kind of see that there's like a trend between these things, and they might mean to the curve. And over the period that Phillips examined, which is to say this period all the way back to the text of his work, over the period he examined the paper, so it's 1861 to 1957, where his total data collection points, there are a few anomalies, like, for example, the wars. And so the wars led us into these like super periods of very high or very low unemployment. And you could examine that data more thoroughly elsewhere. But if we look at the data more recently, it just doesn't follow the trend anymore. So here on the screen is the 1970s till 2005, I think. And like this does not look, I don't know if any of you can tell or not, but this does not approximate a curve. So if we take any longer period of time or a more modern period, then we end up not being able to identify very well the we lose our ability to identify the any longer period. We lose the ability to identify the notion that it could be a curve. And so that's one of the criticisms. The criticism is that the Phillips curve used to work, but now it doesn't. The Phillips curve works for small periods of time, but it doesn't work for longer periods of time, and so on and so forth. Now, everything that we've looked at here so far, this curvy shaped bit here, the opposing inverted version in Core Econ, and Bill Phillips' original curve, these are called the short run Phillips curves. There's also a long run Phillips curve, which we can learn about. It's not specifically stated in our objective for today, but that I think is really well explained by a number of different sources. And so I'm going to ask you with the remainder of your class really to go off and to explore some of the sources. All right. So either look at the criticism or find other information about, let's try that again. So find criticism or other information about the Phillips curve, and you might start with this relatively snappy video by the Khan Academy, if you like. Swell. We'll meet up in class for the regular time at 11:30, and I will ask if you've got any queries, and then set you back to the task of finding more information about this, and we will pick up this discussion a little later on. Okay, thanks so much, everybody.